Hey folks, how's it going? I got a great question a week ago here on YouTube from someone who I believe their name is Graydon. Um, they asked, "What would your advice be to someone who has very little experience writing and has ended up in a corporate job but dreams of doing something they're passionate about? Just start writing small reviews or videos?" Question mark. Okay, so I didn't wanna just, like, type a little, text reply to this, and then maybe potentially have someone ask the same question, 3 days later or whatever the case may be, but, um, I saw a lot of myself in this question. I have been writing professionally since 2011 when I was, like, a junior in college. I started writing and submitting short stories around 2009, um, started submitting, like, essays and things like that, a year or 2 after that. Broke into games journalism in 2016, published my first book in 2019. I've written for StarWars.com, Rolling Stone, Fangoria Magazine, PC Gamer, Kotaku, Polygon, um, IGN, like all those sort of games places. Written about a lot of like Star Wars games and all kinds of stuff, RPGs, Bethesda games, BioWare. My book was on the making of Star Wars: Knights of the Old Republic, and all of that kind of came about by accident because I had this goal, and I told this story in another video, so I'm not going to tell that whole story here. But basically, like, if you are working a job that maybe doesn't like set your soul on fire and like you clock in and you're like, okay, I got to put in 5 hours or 9 hours here at the grocery store or here at the bank. Okay, like I've been that guy. I will likely be that guy again before too long. Like we've all been there. But like there comes a time when you want to have some sort of like personal and creative fulfillment is how I would phrase that. I titled this my notes here, personal and creative fulfillment versus traditional job security. I think this tension is a big one in all kinds of people in the modern day and age. They want that sort of romantic, the art life, they want to make their rap album in their free time or paint or do commissions of Star Wars characters or write books, or write articles about video games for magazines and websites. Been there. But job security in a traditional employment is really useful too because health insurance, many people need it. Many people, it's like non-negotiable. You need some sort of health coverage or vision coverage, dental coverage, like whatever the case may be. Um, and boy, like that tension of job security versus like personal and creative fulfillment, it is an ever present thing, right? So when I see this question from Graydon, what would your advice be to someone who has little experience writing, um, but dreams of doing something they're passionate about? Okay, so where to start? All right. I've got plenty of good news and plenty of bad news. Okay. I was just laid off for the second time in a span of about 17 months. Okay. Um, about 19 months ago, 19, 20 months ago, I was a senior editor at the biggest newspaper company in the United States. Okay. USA Today's shopping e commerce vertical. Okay. They laid off all their union staff, shut the website down, sold it to another company who then immediately reopened it with all the content that the union had produced and written and edited. Um, but only hired back the non-union editors, and okay, dirty, dirty. But anyway, that I could go on all kinds of tangents. I'm not going to do that. My point being, it's a really rough time to work in creative fields, media, journalism, like whatever sort of like wedge of like journalism, entertainment, arts, any of that stuff right now, talk to an animator, talk to a game developer, talk to a filmmaker, talk to a novelist, talk to someone who writes poetry for fun. Like, talk to an artist, um, AI is probably overblown as a threat to the creative arts, but the problem is that we exist in capitalism. This little thing called capitalism that we live in right now, for good or ill, mostly for ill. Um, it makes it so that when these companies talk about all the things AI can do, they can replace Hollywood actors because we got, they can replace influencers, can replace all these human beings who need a job to eat and have a roof over their heads. The smoke and mirrors is really effective because the average person sees all the stuff that they're saying about AI and what it can do, and like they see it as like a chat bot or an image generator, and it's really easy to impress people. And you got the video side of it for a while too. I think the video stuff is kind of like quickly fading out because they closed down OpenAI's Sora for whatever PR panic caused them to do that. But um it's a really rough time to make a living as a writer, artist, creative, animator, um, computer programmer, like a game developer, game designer, like any of those sort of creative jobs that you would love to try and romanticize in your head as like the end all be all end game. Like I did about being a professional writer. I've been a professional writer for 10 years. I mostly love writing and publishing and seeing my name on IGN or StarWars.com or like whatever the case may be, opening an issue of Fangoria magazine and seeing like my oral history of Friday the 13th, the game, or like, um, seeing people talk about they bought my book and they enjoyed it. And that feeling never gets old, but it's all the like little headaches and struggles along the way that kind of do add up. And eventually, um, you see that the grass is always greener. Okay. Unfortunately, the grass is always greener. So, like, I find myself the way that someone who has like a boring, soulless corporate day job romanticizes being a professional writer or artist or whatever the case may be. I'm always romanticizing being a game developer. I've come really close to getting a game design job at places like EA or like Halo. Like, that to me is like the big romantic job. I'd like to work on like an RPG or a horror game someday and like write dialogue for characters in a game. Like, we all have these dreams. Okay. We all are like creative, artistic beings with souls. That's what AI is not and can never be. We all want to show the human part of ourselves to the world and see if it resonates with someone else and connect with people. That's what we have. That's never going away. Um, but I look at the people who have a 5 to 6 figure cushy corporate job in healthcare and vacation time and like I romanticize that a lot. I romanticize my first job as a grocery store stock boy, putting cans on shelves. Sometimes I think I would like to go back to that. I have dreams that I go back to my banking job and I'm like a bank teller again. So the grass is always greener. I don't want to be all doom and gloom, and I don't want to ever discourage anyone. And I said that in my other video that I think Graydon saw and inspired this question. So, um, I don't ever want to discourage anybody, but I think that you should know that it is like a rough time for creative people right now. Making money I think is harder than it's ever been. Like I said, I've been a full-time professional writer basically for 10 years or the better part of 10 years. Sort of right now, I'm kind of like, I just got laid off. I'm trying to like figure out the next move, experimenting with stuff like YouTube and Twitch and streaming, you know, um, seeing what I want to do next, what I enjoy now. I think that it's important for you to be clear that, um, it's a tough road ahead, but it's worth taking if you have like something you want to say about a particular art form, whether you're like you really love movies and you want to write about movies, or you want to write a screenplay. Like, sometimes just doing the thing. I wrote a really crappy horror screenplay in 2021, and I finished it in like 2022 while I was on vacation. I wrapped it up because, it was only like half done or whatever. But um, that was one of the most creatively edifying, satisfying things I've ever done as a human being on planet Earth. I had so much fun. I learned so much about how movies function differently from books or short stories. And I think that it's in real rough shape, and like I would never show it to like a someone in the film industry who was like a producer. Like it would have to be rewritten heavily. And I'm always thinking of ways to like, how can I make that into something that I can show somebody, like a video game, a twine game, um, a short story, a novel. Like I'm always thinking of like, what do I do with that now? But the point is like, not everything has to have money attached to it. Not everything has to have a built-in audience and, SEO value. Not everything has to have a big audience. Sometimes you just want to build a Lego set, or paint a picture or strum a guitar. Okay. Like these are the things that, make me feel alive and good. Okay. Um, okay, a few bullet points that I jotted down in response to this question. The myth of breaking in as a writer. Okay, so I've been reading about this and hearing about it for as long as I've been an aspiring writer, which I really started aspiring to be a professional writer in about 2009. It was like I was watching a bunch of horror movies on DVD. Um, and the short version is that led me to read Just After Sunset, the short story collection that Stephen King put out, in paperback around 2008 or something like that. Read that short story collection. And, I was already a Stephen King fan who had been reading him for years, but it was like there was something about that collection, reinvigorating my love of reading. Um, being a reader, and especially the novella N, which is like told as like this nested first person narrative with like some epistolary elements, like letters. It's basically like letters back and forth between like old childhood friends and like a psychologist or a therapist or whatever, psychotherapist and his patient. And there's like basically like this wound or tear in the fabric of reality, and like this giant monster is going to break through and kill us all. But um he uses the device of OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, which I particularly resonated with me as somebody who suffered from that big time, especially as like a teenager. Like if I touched like my desk with my right hand twice, I would have to then touch the left side of the desk with my left hand twice, and like anything you can imagine. It was really it can be worse than that, obviously. But it's really not fun. And there was something about him making that connection between why obsessive compulsive disorder, why do we have these like inexplicable useless compulsions in our daily life, and it's like, oh, does it keep the monsters out? Well, anyway, the compulsion to write or make videos or stream video games or tell short stories, it kind of that keeps the monster at bay too. But there's okay, yeah. So I had said this myth of breaking in as a writer. You never have it made. People think that they're going to sell a short story, and that means that you're automatically going to sell 80 more short stories. Okay, like just because you sell a short story does not mean you are now Ken Liu or Kelly Link or Stephen King or William Gibson. You know, I in the period of like 4 or 5 years where I was really heavily producing and submitting short stories and trying to do that kind of thing, I think I sold like a dozen short stories to like publications that were really, made I felt really good about them or whatever. But it was like, nobody remembers those stories. Probably nobody remembers those anthologies and things like that. But That's okay, and I think that's true with like a lot of the work that you do as a creative. If you're somebody who's an artist, an animator, an independent filmmaker, um, in my case, people will reach out to me and they'll say, I really appreciate the oral history of Morrowind that you published in Polygon in 2019. I really liked your book on Star Wars Knights of the Republic. And like that never ever gets old. I love hearing that. You don't hear it very often. But like, I think of the thousands of other things that I wrote over the years that no one will ever care about and nobody will ever say anything about. Um, so, just because you make, Shawshank Redemption or The Mist, it doesn't mean that you're going to be, Marty Scorsese and like any, you just like putting out like hit after hit after hit or whatever, like, you know, um, you never are like suddenly set creatively, financially, like the traditional job security that you get at like your boring corporate soulless bank job or your job in whatever the case may be, like project management or accounting. Like people ask me about like writing and stuff, and I'm like, maybe consider an accounting degree, maybe go into this or that, but here's how you can do this if you insist, like the people who want to be writers or be creative people, like they're going to figure out a way to do it to some extent, and so that's great. Like if any of these videos help somebody figure that out, like sometimes just listening to somebody talk about how they did it can really like spark something about how you can think about things differently and maybe get to where you want to be. Which brings me to another point. Decide what it is you truly want to do. Um, like in the question, again, I don't want to pick on anybody. Like the question says, like, I want to do something I'm passionate about. Should I just start writing small reviews or videos? I have this feeling every day. Like I want to do like 10 different creative things. We all have the same 24 hours, same 7 days a week, etc. Unfortunately. So like, you can't write 10 books a year. Maybe you can. Not me. You have so many spoons, so many hours in the day, so much energy, so much sort of creative inspiration, your work ethic, what you're capable of creatively or in terms of like your energy level is finite. Your time on earth is finite. Um, so like you have to figure out what it is you want to do and then what you need to do to get to that point. And so when I was setting out to be a writer, I wanted to publish short stories. So I wrote short stories and I submitted them and I rinsed and I repeated. And like I said, I sold like a dozen short stories long time ago. Um, then my last short story that sold to like a cool venue was in like a cool anthology. The author of Bird Box, which got made into a Sandra Bullock movie on Netflix, the author reached out to the editor of the anthology and said, that Alex Kane guy should write a novel. Well, guess what? It's now 11 years later and I have not written that goddamn novel. So, you've only got so much time and like do as I say, not as I do, but set achievable goals, concrete goals, and then do what you need to get there. Don't flail around in the dark. Hit your milestones, work toward the thing that you really want. Um, and a key sort of aside to this is don't bother with gatekeepers in 2026. Okay. All the gatekeepers have been laid off. I should know. Okay. So, gatekeepers being editors, basically editors, film producer, like anybody who can say no to you when you send off your thing into the world. Okay. Like, don't bother with that out of the gate, I would say, probably. Okay. In 2026, 2027. Um, the goals that you want to set for yourself make okay, you say reviews or videos, so you want to review 10 games and see if you like writing game reviews and maybe one day writing game reviews for IGN or Kotaku or wherever. That's a very achievable goal, I promise you. You just have to kind of work for it for a while. um, or maybe you want to make 10 YouTube videos. That's something you can control, is like doing the thing, okay? Sending it off into the world to an editor, or to like pitching it to somebody, an agent, or a creative, manager. Like an editor or an agent is going to tell you no a lot of the time. If you want to really build momentum as a creative person, and this is kind of like me looking back in hindsight at sort of my path too, is like I put a lot of stock in gatekeepers and editors and things like that, because it made sense to do that when I was starting really young, and had a poor sense of what was good or bad that came from me. Okay. I'm a very poor judge of what I do, whether it's good or bad. I think I'm getting better at that as time goes on. I think I have a better sense of when effort translates to quality something, like if I spend like a week on a YouTube video, it's probably going to be better than the YouTube video that I just sort of rattle off like this one, sort of, um, just sort of sharing my experience with you, right? But I think this can be useful. So I hope this does help you. Make things, experiment with different creative formats that interest you. You say small reviews and videos. So experiment with those, do them. You know, Starting things is very easy. Finishing things is very hard. And find the thing that you like, the process of like getting it over the finish line, and actually saying like, wow, I finished that YouTube video. Wow, I finished that Twitch, whatever big stream thing you're doing on Twitch, or I finished that drawing or that video. Learn to love the process and the feeling, bottle that feeling of how good it is to finish something, and care about that more than you care about some editor, or some important so and so saying, "Oh, good job," um, because there is so few of those people right now, and they probably have when they get their job as like an editor, like they bring their pool of freelance writers that they love working with to the table already. So like, I'm not saying they're hiring their friends, but like they're in the club and they're hiring their friends, and many of us are not always in that club. Okay. Like that is the unfortunate truth of like, um if you're not going to say you want to work in video games or in media, if you're not going to like San Diego Comic Con and GDC and like movie premieres and interviewing, if you're not like where the action is, so to speak, and you're like me and you just have like your sort of quiet life in the real world, but you still care about doing these creative things and contributing something interesting and creative to the world, you're going to have a hard time with sort of getting um the big gig right out of the gate. Okay. I applied to jobs at IGN for years and years and years, and in my cover letters and in my resume and in my clips I said, I have written for Rolling Stone, I've written for the official Star Wars website, I've written for Variety and all these places. And IGN don't give a damn, because they're going to hire their buddy who they know that they've worked with in the past, and they liked working with that person, and maybe they don't know you. And the one time that I did get a foot in the door and sort of break in at IGN and start writing for them was because one of my earliest publisher mentors in games journalism was then working for them, and also and I don't think he knew that I was going to be working on the project, but another guy who I had sort of befriended at a Destiny 2 press event in 2017 was the editor looking for someone to write this little documentary about Bethesda, and he knew that I knew those games like intimately, and had written about Morrowind and stuff like that. So um it's not who you know, but that comes into play, unfortunately. And like when you're looking to sort of break in, really get a foot in the door, get your dream job. People like me who come from the sort of boring corporate, you know, day job, 9 to 5 world, we struggle because we sort of start out with a different mindset that like the work is going to speak for itself. And like, we don't sort of brand ourselves. Like it's hard. It's hard to network and do it in a way that is non-transactional and like, um, I've made some really great friends in my years as like a very, not, I don't want to say public figure because I'm not, but like as a professional writer or someone whose name you could find on a website somewhere on Forbes or whatever, like I've made some great friends that way, going on podcasts and hanging out with people and playing video games with them and talking to them. I made friends from all walks of life and all these different like creative industries, and it's so cool. Um, but like sometimes people don't have the best intentions and they will kind of like you just got to be careful. You got to be careful of like who you trust, unfortunately. And sometimes the people that you think are like really cool and they're your friend because they're interested in that book you're writing or whatever, like maybe they've got some crazy stories going on there that you don't know about. Um, so don't let yourself be exploited because you're passionate. Don't let yourself be exploited because you're passionate. Build something for yourself as an independent creator before you allow some content mill style operation to bleed you dry and take all that passion out of you. That's kind of like the paradox, right? It's like everybody talks about like, oh, I love my job so much and I'm so passionate about games. Well, in this world of capitalism and a poor form of it at that we exist in right now, people will just suck you bone dry. Unfortunately, like in I think it was 2020, I got what I thought was my dream job. I don't want to really talk about this too much because it was a rough time, but I got the job title of U.S. gaming editor at a website. I thought this is my big moment. This is the start of new chapter of my career. I finally am going to make my mark somewhere. No, it was an SEO driven content mill that just destroyed any love I had for games journalism for a significant length of time and really, really destroyed my soul for a little bit. And yeah, that was rough. So know your value, and if you can own what you build, do that. Okay, so like if your options are write an article for like I don't want to name publications like specific publications, but like um some publication is going to pay you $15 to write an article that takes you like a day to do or something like that. Because like in the beginning, it's going to take you a long time to write a good article. Okay. Like it just will. Like you getting fast and good takes time and practice. Writing any creative work is just like a sport. It's just like golf. It's like basketball. It's like presumably ice skating, but you'll never see me out on the ice or anything. But like everything just takes practice, repetition, time, dedication, a little bit of knowledge, some wisdom, like all the creative things that you admire. If you like Dragon Ball Z and you're like, well, that Akira Toriyama, he could really draw, man. It wasn't because like he was just born with a pencil in his hand and he could like draw Goku and Bulma flawlessly. It was like this is a guy who loved doing that, and so he did that all the day, every day for like I don't know, however long he lived, right? So he died kind of young, but anyway, um, you know, rather than write for like a shitty website that pays you next to nothing and then like changes your article and makes it worse than it was when you handed it in, put it on Medium, put it on YouTube, put it on whatever your platform of choice is, like there's like a lot of like sort of newsletter, there's like we live in kind of this Wild West moment. It's kind of a crappy moment, but there's like freedom in it. Like the fact that all of us are struggling and all of us are sort of laid off and trying to figure things out right now means that you are on a level playing field with people who have worked at Washington Post or have worked at IGN or have worked at Respawn Entertainment or have worked on, like everybody is we're all the crabs in the same bucket right now. So like, don't give up when it seems hard. Um, you know, Editors know how hard it is to find work in this publishing landscape. So clips and bylines like saying like, "Oh, I wrote for StarWars.com, I wrote for Rolling Stone," like all those things that I use when I want to try to sound like I know what I'm doing and I'm authoritative. That means so little now compared to like just you going and writing an article and putting it on the internet and saying, "Look at this thing I wrote. I'm very proud of it. I think I did a good job on this and I like put myself into this. I try to do a good job." That is the important thing, doing the work, trying to do a good job, being proud of it and showing it to people, putting it out into the world, however that, however you approach that. Um, that's the way to go. Put it on somewhere, TikTok, whatever, Instagram, threads, like whatever is your sort of medium format of choice. Be careful about what medium you choose, but like, um, just if you can own it, so much the better. And that's why I'm doing stuff like YouTube and Twitch right now. Start a podcast. If you don't want to write a book, because you're scared to write a book, write a podcast, write a bunch of essays or short stories, and then surprise, maybe you wrote a book if those things all kind of are connected. Yeah, don't give up when it seems hard. Work at the stuff that inspires you. Keep going. And if you're gonna do something, do it for yourself and not for some corporation that's gonna underpay you, fiddle with your work, and squeeze the soul out of your writing, and make it sound like everything else for the sake of SEO or a house style. A lot of publications, whether it's a magazine, um, a news program or a website or whatever the case may be, they have a sort of house style, house voice. When I was writing for StarWars.com, it was like, you're not really writing as Alex Kane, you're writing as StarWars.com, you're writing as sort of like Lucasfilm's official website, that can take some of the soul and personality out of your writing. And that's just something to be aware of when you're going into, I want to do creative work, like, write game reviews or videos. People recently very, very much got pissed off at an IGN review that they felt was unfair because the player didn't vibe. He found that the various elements of the game did not like cohere into a harmonious vision that said what it intended to say properly. He didn't vibe with the game, and of course people really were pissed at him and told him that they hope he gets cancer and stuff like that. Um, don't be afraid to be that person who, you're not saying things for the sake of being provocative and pissing people off. You're saying things because you have a unique voice and you actually do believe what you're saying. Okay. So like if I play Friday the 13th, the game, and I think, which is, I can't anymore, but I've been thinking about it a lot. If I play like Resident Evil 2 remake and I think, that game is not as good as Resident Evil 3 remake, which a lot of people disagree with. Like, just believe in what you feel when you experience art. So you're reviewing a game, and you feel strongly about this mechanic does not work with, and like writing game reviews is like a whole other video, but like, um, believe in what you feel about a work of art if you're reviewing it, and so be an individual, be probably a brand, don't just tell the truth. Tell the truth is the rule of writing and reviewing games and things like that. So people want to believe that there's like an objective, like this game is the number one game of all time, and this game is the number five game of all time, and this one's a 7 out of 10, and this one's a 10 out of 10. Bullshit. That's not true. That, you play Minecraft and you slay the Ender Dragon with your brother on a Tuesday afternoon and play it on the Xbox 360 or on the PC or on the JavaScript version, and you have your experience of a game that no one else has quite exactly, right? Okay, good game design means a lot of people will have a similar experience, but like if you're going to write about games and talk about games, what is the thing that you can say that nobody else is going to because they are not you? What is the thing that you can bring to the table? Um, Ted Chiang, who wrote the short story that the movie Arrival was based off of, Story of Your Life. His thing. I think he was the one who said, um, in a lecture, like write the story that you only you can write in on the way that only you can write it. Otherwise, why bother? Um, um, but okay, and then the final point is try to find editors, and I this is kind of contradicts some of the other things I've been saying. But if you do want to, you get the opportunity to write something for IGN one day. You get the opportunity to write for StarWars.com or PC Gamer magazine or whatever the case may be. You get the opportunity to work with one of these websites or outlets, publications, magazines. Find the editors and mentors who enjoy working with you specifically, and then develop a relationship, but and learn from them, and always be improving your work. It's really hard for you to know what is good and bad in your own writing when you're early on. Okay. Um, I think that's certainly been the case with me. I've probably gotten a little bit better at it as time's gone on. A little bit of confidence gets built up over time, but um, you want to learn, you want to get better. I think that the first time I ever wrote something for a really big publication that people had heard of, I wrote an article about Halo Wars 2. Um, and I went into it like I'm a great writer who knows about Halo. I was very young. This was a long time ago. This was 9 years ago. Okay. I went into it sort of very cocky and excited to be doing it. I think we went through 3 or 4 drafts, and it was a gauntlet. It was very intense to have the people who had commissioned me to write the article basically struggling to tell me what they wanted me to write, and me wanting to write what is true to me in my heart, and as a Halo fan with opinions about Halo and things like that. Um, but it is worth it to go through those gauntlets once or twice or 3 times in your career and be like, okay, this is hard. They are making me work for this. This is kind of a pain in the ass. This has taken a while. I didn't think it was going to be like this. You're going to learn something because your writing can always be better. I mean, look at the writers in the New Yorker. Read widely, read stuff that you wouldn't normally read. Don't just read, the magazines that you read right now, Car and Driver and GQ and Kotaku or whatever. Like read those things, but also read the New Yorker, the Paris Review, or the whatever the case might be, whatever your favorite newspaper is, whoever you read poetry, um, I'm always trying to like read writers I've never seen before and glean a different perspective, and that sort of like creative spark that like if you always read the same stuff by the same writers, you're gonna feel very comfortable and also very stale, and like your writing will get a little bit pedestrian and you won't be excited about it, and it'll show. And like when you discover a writer who like really sets your world on fire, it will challenge you to try new things and get better. I think that's a very long-winded answer to your question. Just starting right, just start writing small reviews or videos. So you're in kind of a good position in life with a good corporate job, but you dream of doing something you're more passionate about. The good news is you can do the thing you're passionate about right now without delay, without any gatekeepers holding you back. The bad news is there are far less people willing to pay you well for it right now. And you have a lot of voices out there competing with yours, just like me here on YouTube or me out when I'm on Twitch streaming Resident Evil or whatever. Um, there are a lot of people out there trying to do the thing that you want to do. And um, the good news is they are not you. And so you can be as much of you as you can always. And like, when I like, if you can bring stories from your life into your work in a way that isn't like sort of ridiculous and like a total tangent, do that. Like put yourself in your work. I mean, study art history, study uh good good film and read good books and learn from the people who kind of stick around, like the David Lynch's and the Vincent Van Goghs and the Kelly Links, and William Gibson's, like the writers who um when they put out a book or whatever or a show, it's an event. When William Gibson used to put out a novel, it was like a big event in the literary world. I've read like two of his books, three of his books, and it's like, the guy can write a sentence and, you know, you don't always want to be looking at things that way, but like the word choices matter and the poetry of an observation or an image, um, you know, prose that really sings and feels alive and shows that you observe the world that you're living in. Like that stuff is always going to kind of wow people. And people want to learn, people want to learn about the world. And so if you go out and observe and learn about the world and come to things with like a passion, um, and then put that in your writing, like that's gonna make the difference. That's when you get one of those special things that people do email you about 10 years later or 7 years later and say, "Hey Alex, I really liked that big story you wrote for Polygon years ago. The one good thing you ever wrote." And like, um, you have to just, that was me really going for it. That was something I did sort of on the side for fun in my free time. Um, I was paid pretty well for it, by the way. And and I guess that's the other thing is like, if you do something for money with a gatekeeper, with an editor, work for hire situation, try to get paid well, ask for a lot of money. My first thing I ever wrote for IGN, they offered me $1,000 for a big documentary video project that I wrote and got footage for. They offered me $1,000. I said I was thinking more like 2,000, and they said yes, and I got paid $2,000, and that is the how I was able to afford my PC. That was the first time I ever owned a gaming PC in my life. Was because uh, IGN offered me one figure, and I asked them for double. And you can do that. So go out there and make stuff you're proud to show people, and be fearless and passionate. But yeah, good news and bad news for sure. Thanks so much. I appreciate your question.